Joost will be talking about how his, I would say, probably the work-related thing you're most proud of, Joost SEO plugin, how that enabled him to see how contributing to open source actually makes everything better. Not just the code, but also the community, and also everything that is around the community, the things that some of you may see, some of you may be aware of that it's actually there, but a lot of people using WordPress don't actually know there's a big community behind it, and that you can help contributing to that community. So, without further ado, please welcome Joost de Valk to the stage.
Good morning. Now I need to do some switching. Better? Still muted, I guess.
No.
Better?
There it is. Play. Press play.
Press play. There's no play on me. I need to press play there, but maybe not on the slide, somewhere in the middle. So half of my slides are in Dutch, the other half are in English anyway, because it just doesn't matter. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
In the back too? Good. Good morning. We're going to talk about 5 for the future. And 5 for the future is an idea that Matt Mullenweg, one of the co-founders of WordPress, originally put out. An idea in which he said companies or individuals working with WordPress should invest 5% of their time back into WordPress to invest in the future of WordPress, which I think is a lovely idea, but it underestimates the value of actually contributing to WordPress. Which is why I've sort of redubbed it 5 for the present. I can honestly say that Joost as a company would never be where it is at now if we had not been contributing to WordPress the way we have. We always have contributed to WordPress, which is about as much as we can. So I'll talk to you about a lot of different things, but let's start with what is WordPress. And I know all of you think of WordPress and you think of that admin screen and that editing screen, but WordPress is so much more. WordPress is most of all an open source project. And open source means that we collaborate on everything and anything related to it. It is a collaboration of a whole load of people. A whole load of people that puts up WordCamps like this around the world in such a staggering amount that it's by now bloody impossible to sponsor them all. And we've tried. And of course, this community works on WordPress core. And when people talk about WordPress core, people from outside the WordPress community always think, what the hell are they talking about? Well, WordPress core is the code. It's WordPress itself. And there's a lot more code because there's also the WordPress meta team, which works on WordPress.org. There is a lot of plugins that are surrounded by, and that are supported by the community, but that are not part of WordPress core. But somehow most people relate when they see things like contributor days and they see people working on things like everyone's working on WordPress core, and that's just not true. If you look on an average contributor day like yesterday, there will be a core team, but more than half of people will be working on something else. The community design stuff, these slides are in Dutch, so those of you who are English speakers or don't speak Dutch, you can learn some Dutch by conferring. But they make designs. We have people like Leon here in front who works on accessibility, which is what we think is one of the most important aspects of WordPress, is that we actually think about accessibility, and that code of conduct that Taco just talked about doesn't just apply to us being here in this room together and treating each other nicely. It means that we allow everyone to use our software. By now, luckily, this is also just common law in most of the decent states of the world, that you have to allow people who are blind or otherwise have handicaps that would make it harder for them to use software, that you have to work on that and have to make it accessible. But this is hard work. And this is something that also requires people looking at it, testing it, etc. The community translates. The fact that most of you probably use WordPress in Dutch. Who here uses WordPress in its native language? Hands up. That's a lot of you. My wife's here saying, I'm not allowed to. Because Joost.com is set to English, I'm sorry. The community also writes documentation. I want to say right now, if you come out of this thinking, I need to do something on WordPress and I don't really know what, this is where you probably should start. Because if there is one thing we have a lack of in many, many, many areas, it's documentation. And this is a never-ending problem for every software project in the world. Turns out people that write code are not necessarily also good writers. The community organizes WordCamps. Awesome small ones like this, and it's not even that small. But also slightly bigger ones like WordCamp Europe. Who was in Paris this summer? A lot of you. On these WordCamps, we have contributor days. And contributor days are where a lot of these people come together and work on WordPress together. But it's also slightly scary for people because people don't know what a contributor day is until they've been there. And in a way, it's sort of sad that I'm doing this talk now and the contributor day was yesterday. So you can't come and contribute. But I want to urge you, and I'll show you, I'll talk a bit later on about when you can start and where you can start. But during these contributor days, we have these tables where people sit, and they're willing to help you on board in what you're doing. And that could be support. I think there was a pretty large support table that Remkes was leading yesterday. Remkes is in the back now. There's 2 tables of support people, right? People, literally, support is nothing more than sitting down, going into the forums, and answering people's questions. The fact that we do that together and for free makes WordPress a lot better than most of the companies that are around it. It's what makes open source work. Of course, they also work on core and on lots of other things. But what you find if you go to a lot of these is that these contributor days become the strategy sessions. It's where you meet people and where you talk about, okay, so what are we going to do in the next few months? It's also why some of us have to attend too many of these WordCamps, because that's the point where decisions get made and then we go out and do all the work. So contributor days are an essential part of this whole contribution system, but all of the work is mostly done on Slack. And on WordPress has this bug tracking system called Track. And if you've worked on GitHub, then Track is about as awful as it gets. Because, well, it's ridiculous. But switching would be a lot of work, so that's not going to happen. We're just slowly moving in the direction of GitHub, it seems. More and more is moving over to GitHub. And if you're a developer, then Track will be slightly hard to deal with in the beginning. But it is there, and, well, there's a lot of discussion going on. So people do all these things. Why would you do that? There's no one telling you to do this. You don't have to. There's no one saying you can't use WordPress if you don't contribute. That's the awesomeness of open source. If if you're using it and you're not contributing, you're what's called a free rider. And we can handle quite a bit of free riding. Luckily, because, well, there's millions and millions of sites using WordPress. I don't know the number, maybe Josefa knows the actual number of sites right now. I know there's about 7 million sites using Yoast SEO, and we're by far not on all sites. So there's like a gigantic number of sites that uses WordPress. And most of those people are not in this room and are not contributing. Even in Nijmegen, which is, if you look at the broader surroundings, there's probably like, what, 400,000 or 500,000 people if you take Arnhem, Nijmegen, and that area together. There's probably hundreds of, if not thousands of people using WordPress today that don't even realize that this event is on. But they're not contributing to the community. That's fine, but the thought of 5% for the future is if everyone who uses WordPress professionally would use 5% of their time to work on WordPress, we'd be bigger than anyone else on the planet. 28% of websites on the web uses WordPress. If 5% of the time of all the people using and building those websites went into improving WordPress in an efficient manner, everyone else could close shop. And yet, why? Because that's all awesome, but it doesn't bring anything to me. A part of this is ideology. We really feel that the mission of WordPress to allow everyone to publicize their ideas is worthwhile, and we want to contribute to that. Also, as Joost and as a person, but as a company too, we want to give back. We're making money off of WordPress. We're leading awesome lives because of WordPress. We can do what we want to do because of that. We want to give back to the community. And that probably goes for a lot of people. Like, hey, you sort of owe it to the community, I feel, to give back. That's reason number one. Reason number two is a lot more fun. It is fun. And I came into this community and I didn't really know about most of the code of conduct stuff until like 2 years ago, because I was really not like that into it. But that strict code of conduct and how strict we allow everyone to participate is part of what makes this community so awesome. It's why in this room I see more women than you see on any average tech conference. It's why a lot more people with accessibility problems use WordPress than most other CMSs, because we actually think about that stuff. It's because we care about everyone and not just male white men, even though I'm pretty fine with being a male white man. All of this is just mostly feel good. There's also actual business reasons why I think that 5% for the future is actually 5% for the present. And the most important one of that is knowledge. If you work on WordPress core, or if you work in the support forums, or if you work on anything related to WordPress, you will find that you will learn a lot about WordPress core, which you can use when you're helping your clients. Stuff that you never run into when you're just doing your client stuff, you're just pumping out yet another website. You will also learn about new features. One of the things that I'm guessing a lot of people will mention today, but who here knows what Gutenberg is? I'd like to see a raise of hands. If you leave today not knowing what Gutenberg is, you've not done yourself a good service. So make sure that by the end of today, you've seen it. On someone's laptop, on whatever. Use it. Gutenberg is a new editing experience coming to WordPress. And it's not just the editing experience that they're touching an awful lot of what is WordPress and what defines WordPress. And you can learn about it now, whereas most people who do not participate in the community will at some point get the feeling that all of us had when Facebook introduced timeline. Or when we in Joost SEO change our interface and we get like hundreds of thousands of people going, ah! Because, well, changing an interface is never fun. Even when it's an improvement, people will complain because you just changed what they were used to. And Gutenberg is quite the change. It's going away from the traditional, almost Word-like editing interface to something more modern, which people will have to get used to. So prepare yourself now and learn about it. The next thing that contributing to WordPress brings, and this is something that people really underestimate, is influence. The influence you get from just being there when the discussion happens is ridiculously big. A lot of things in WordPress are decided by the people who happen to be working on X and the people who are there deciding what it's going to be. So, for instance, a few weeks ago, we had a large discussion in the Gutenberg channels on WordPress Slack about accessibility. One of our Joost employees, Andrea Furcia, he's Italian. He works on Core for a portion of his time, and we donate that time to Core. And he works on accessibility, and he's been creating issues and issues and issues on accessibility because new issues were created every day. People were writing new code, and new code they were writing was not accessible. And at some point I get mad, and I went in, I was like, okay, don't you guys want to learn? If you create new features, and we've already fixed this in the previous version of this feature, maybe you should have looked at what we changed and look at what Andrea's saying and implement that. And it looks like they've improved. That's pure influence, just by saying, hey guys, come on, we need to look at this. We cannot roll out Gutenberg without it being accessible because we'd be breaking the law in about 15 countries in the world on government sites. And things happen. There's also small things. A good example of that is that we now show on WordPress.org, we show that the minimum required PHP version for a plugin. That's a header that you can set in the plugin file now, and you can say, hey, this requires that minimum PHP version. And soon, actually, people who run a version lower than that will not be able to install that plugin. This is, for users, this is a very, very tiny, small thing. For developers, this is huge. Because it means we can actually drop 5.2 before Core does. Which this was sort of what it was intended to be, because I want Core to drop 5.2 as fast as possible, and well. Then there's the network effect. If you have support questions and you're active in the community and you've got friends, well, and you go around and you ask your friends, because they will be willing to help you. I know that when we have multi-site questions, for instance, there's a couple of people that I don't see Jonathan here yet. I think about, there you are. Or Felix Arns, who's a German friend of ours, who we can just ask and say, hey, how does this work? I know I did this recently. I was setting up a network, a multi-site network for local schools in the city we live in. And I needed to have different domains pointing to the multi-site. And I was fighting with it. It didn't work. I was like, Felix, what am I doing wrong? And 5 minutes later, the problem was fixed. Whereas I could probably have been looking at that for hours and hours and hours had I not known Felix. This network effect is really, really what's going to make you a better WordPress developer and a better person to serve your clients, because you have a network to fall back on. And that network is huge. Because funnily enough, there's a lot of WordPress developers here probably who build WordPress sites. I can tell you one thing, if we do our marketing well, there's always more people who need WordPress sites than there are people willing to build them. And there's all these layers of, hey, we build sites of 100K, and yes, this happens in WordPress too, and we need to stop thinking that people don't do that. There's people who build 10K WordPress sites, there's people who build 5K WordPress sites, and all of that is fine. And if you know these other people, then you can refer them to these other people. If maybe building the next WordPress site for a bank, a national bank here in Holland, is not a job for you, then there are other people here who can do that and who'd like to take that job and who'd be thankful if you referred that to them. And the other way around. Another awesome thing that you can do by being in the community is find new people to work for you. Joost has grown quite a bit. We're now with 50 people in Wiegen, which is, well, just 15 minutes away from here, and 20 more worldwide. And we used to be with 20 early last year. My wife's contradicting me here, which is her job. A lot of these people that we hired, we knew from the community. Actually, 2 examples of people that we didn't even officially completely hire but sponsor are here today. You've seen Remkes. He's saying all these nice things because, well, we're paying him. Maybe it was the other way around, but and Alain, who's speaking later today, we're paying for their time to work on core. Or in Remkes' case, we're paying for his time to go to WordCamps and help people set up WordCamps. There's so much more that can be done. So what can you do? Well, if you're a developer, you could work in core. There's a lot of people working on core, and I can tell you it's probably one of the most frustrating pieces of WordPress to work on, because the chance of your code reaching core are both very, very high, and it can take a long time before you get there. I recently had Sergey, another colleague of us, by chance commit some of the patches that I'd written 6 years ago, and they recently went into core. Some of this takes a lot of time, and the core part of WordPress is a large community. If you want to start, you're probably better off starting by helping organize a WordCamp, which is, by the way, one of the ways I started contributing to, by organizing together with Remkes WordCamp in LA 2009 was the first. So that is one of the ways you can start. A lot of people also start with translations. There's a lot of software out there that doesn't have Dutch translations by default. So you can, if you use a plugin and you use it a lot for your clients and it's not translated, well, invest the time to translate it into Dutch. It's not hard. You go to translate.wordpress.org and you start there, and if you then can't figure out what you have to do, then you give someone like Taco or Remkes a shout and you say, hey, how does this work? How do I get started? You can work on documentation. Probably talk to Giuseppe. She's way in the back. Marketing. We don't have, I think, anyone from the marketing team of WordPress here as well, but that's Giuseppe. Hey, there you are. So there's a lot of things that you can do. And one of the things the question I seem to a lot of companies to be asking is, how do you do this as a company? How do you decide how you invest your time? I can't really answer this for you because it's a decision that you guys need to make for yourself, but I can tell you what we do. At Joost, we invest not 5%, but 20% of our earnings back into the community. So the community for us is wider than just WordPress because we invest 20% of our, that also includes our local town and a lot of other things, but 20% of our earnings goes back into the community, and we do that in a couple of different ways. We sponsor people like Remkes and Ella. We have people who we hired who work full-time for us on core, like Sergey. Some of you might have seen him. He's Russian. It's unfortunately incredibly hard for him currently to come anywhere outside of Russia. We have core afternoons in our office where our entire development team currently is working on documenting all the JavaScript in core. So that's where we go on Thursday afternoon, 2 or 3 o'clock we start, and we take 2 or 3 hours, and the entire development team is working together on documenting all the JavaScript in core. There's all these ways in which you can do things. Taco has been organizing this WordCamp and has been doing a lot for WordCamp Europe. Start somewhere. And the 20% we do can seem very daunting. But I can tell you one thing, if you invest time in the community, you'll soon want to do more because you can figure out that the return on investment is actually there. It is good fun, but it will really bring you a lot. So where do you start? Well, you start at make.wordpress.org, which is the site of people who make WordPress. And then you look at all the options there. Or you start at a contributor day. Now, there is not that many contributor days in Holland just yet, even though we're getting more WordCamps. WordCamp Utrecht will have a contributor day, so by all means, if you've never been to a contributor day and after the day you think, I want to go there, go there. But to make it a little bit easier for everyone in the Nijmegen area, we've decided that we're going to do WordPress contributing afternoons at Joost every 6 weeks. Now, I literally thought of this as I was making this presentation earlier this week. So this is in progress, but somewhere between now and 6 weeks will be the first. And with that, maybe you have some questions. I can't really drop the mic. If you don't have any questions and I've bored you to death, then...
you didn't mention meetups, but also a good place to...
Absolutely. So WordCamps is probably too small a thing. So meetups are, in many ways, a good way to start. The WordPress meetup Nijmegen, I think the next one's next Thursday. It's huge. It has about as many people as this WordCamp has. And if you've never been there, you really should go. Woensdag? It's next Wednesday. If you're not Dutch, you're probably not going to be here by next Wednesday anyway. More questions? If not, go forth and look at Gutenberg if you haven't. And have fun today. Thank you.